Hello, I'm the Culture Genie, and you are welcome to today's episode of You Fail at Thinking, where we deal with logical fallacies and bad thinking in philosophy. The topic of today is Argumentum ad Populum, the logical fallacy of arguing that because something is popular, it must be right. Just because many people believe something to be right does not make something right. Or just because a lot of people do something, it does not make it the right thing to do. The numbers of believers in something does not change the correctness of a statement or a fact. For example, just because a lot of people believe that the world was flat once does not mean that it was, nor does a logical argument that is unrelated to what people think made invalid due to the majority of people believing the opposite. The world does not become flat due to people believing that it's flat. Argumentum ad populum is a type of genetic fallacy. It has a focus on who argues something rather than the argument in itself, and thus it's a logical fallacy due to it. In this case, it focused on the fact that the arguer is of the majority position. There exists a lot of variants of this fallacy that are common in fallacious arguments. For example, examples of argumentum ad populum includes the variant saying that something is growing in support of X. As the numbers for supporting something are irrelevant, thus the growth of numbers is also irrelevant, as it does not become more truthful due to the fact that more people are starting to believe it. Nor does an argument become less valid due to it becoming less supported by people in their opinions without any additional arguments. As again, the numbers of believers in something is not an argument for or against that is valid logically, unless you discuss something that is directly connected to the majority opinion or opinions in themselves and their popularity. Thus the argument could be valid. Argumentum ad populum combines a lot with other fallacies. For example, calling someone an extremist or other fringe person is not just an ad hominem argument, an argument about the person rather than the argument in itself, but it's also an ad populum argument since it states that he is not part of the majority, and thus it's both an attack on the person and an attack on the fact that the argument is not supported by the mainstream or majority. It's not a valid attack on the argument, logically. This type of argumentation also relates to another fallacy, called the golden mean fallacy, but that will be for another video. Another common type of fallacious argument that combines this fallacy of argumentum ad populum with the argumentum ab auctoritate, argument from authority, is to say that it's often the consensus among scientists and thus must only be right because of it. I stress only here as talking about this type of argumentation because the consensus is unimportant as it's a reference to the majority opinion. But if there is a consensus, there are usually other reasons as to why a scientific statement or argument might be true logically. Just because someone uses a fallacy to defend a conclusion does not make the greater argument or conclusion wrong in itself. For example, I could argue that most people believe that the moon circles the earth, and it is right due to so many people believing it. However, just because I made a fallacious argument does not mean that the conclusion is wrong. It would still be right that the moon circles the earth due to other reasons. It's just that my argument to get to that conclusion is wrong, not the conclusion in itself. It is important for me to mention that there are cases where arguing about what the majority believes is not a fallacious type of argument. This is when you actually argue about something being a majority opinion or not. For example, why a certain candidate for a political election is popular. You could, for example, argue that it is due to the politician having opinions that align with the majority of opinion among the voters. This is not an invalid argument, as what the majority believes or thinks in this case is relevant as it has a direct connection to the argument which does not exist in a fallacious Argumentum ad Populum argument. This is because it's directly connected to opinions and to what the majority is, rather than a disconnected argument where the majority opinion actually does not affect the matter discussed. Thus, arguments when discussing what people think or how they will react due to the beliefs of a majority when making arguments related to popular opinion and views is not usually fallacious, as arguments about popularity are directly related to the arguments in this case. You don't want to accuse someone of having a fallacious argument when in fact it's not fallacious. Hopefully this video has been interesting and informative to you, my viewers. If you have any questions, please leave comments. And if you like the video, push the like button, as it helps me and the algorithm. Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities. اشترك بالقناة من فضلكم.